Fei Lu Novel Network A.Level Contracted Novel. Marvel's Strongest Pupil Technique. Unknowingly traversing the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Jones realized before he could react that he seemed to have kidnapped Iron Man Todd Stark, soaked him in water, and was still his guardian sleeping trough. Isn't that good? Fortunately, just as Jones was about to lose hope in life, his golden finger came. Writing Will Eyes Reincarnation Eye Laser Eye Dead Evil Eyes. This is Marvel Cinematic Universe with the number Earth.199999. Watch Jones with a pair of eyes, zone horizontally in it. Fei Lu Novel Network reminds you that this novel and its characters are purely fictional. If there are any similarities, they are purely coincidental and should not be imitated. Chapter 1. Iron Man in Difficulty. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Number Earth.199999 Marvel Universe, Earth, a desert on East Asian Earth, in a huge cave. I said, don't waste your efforts. There are hundreds of guards here, each fully armed, ranging from daggers and pistols to explosives and missiles. Throw them all out. Even if you blow up a district of New York, it's not a big problem. Do you still want to run out of here? Looking through the iron door window at a decadent man inside, Jones had a faint smile on his face and a hint of laziness emanating from his whole body. Is that right? Upon hearing Jones' words, the man inside who seemed to be being detained not only didn't get angry, but also seemed to have picked up some energy and loudly said, "Is it because you are also one of these hundreds of guards?" At this point, the man paused slightly and continued, "But if I'm not mistaken, you should belong to the lowest status among these hundreds of people. That's why you were sent to see the prison. Do you call this room where you are being held a prison?" Jones smiled wickedly upon hearing the man's words and continued, "So, now you're just a prisoner through labor." At this point, Jones's smile became even stronger as he said, "So, I'm a prison guard now, and it seems like I have a higher status than you. Do you think so? Dear Mr. Tony Stark? You." Upon hearing Jones' words, Tony's expression instantly froze, with an angry expression on his face. He turned around and walked into the small prison. And as Tony turned around, Jones could still clearly see the blue light flashing through his chest, which was the savior that sustained his life and the poison that gradually pushed him to the brink of death. That's right, this person is Tony Stark, chairman and CEO of Stark Industries, the famous Iron Man, and a major member of the Avengers. Of course, these are all things in the future. Tony now is just a troubled playboy. That's right, he's in trouble. Tony is currently suffering his first disaster in life. Being kidnapped into a desert in the Middle East. And it was here that Tony completed his transformation from Playboy Tony Stark to Iron Man. And Jones's character, it's a bit speechless. According to the plot of various novels, Jones felt that he should travel until before Tony's difficulties, and then propose the concept of steel armor, or on the other side of this door, share joys and sorrows with Tony, study steel armor together, escape from here together, and then mix up with a pair of steel armor or something. However, this is ultimately the plot from the novel. Looking down at his gray-brown, somewhat tattered clothes, a few hand grenades hanging from his waist, a pistol pinned to his leg, and a rifle on his back, Jones felt a bit overwhelmed with tears and laughter. He traveled very close to Tony, very close. How to say it? When Tony was knocked unconscious by a stray bullet, it was Jones who carried him back. When Tony refused the warlord's request to build a missile, it was Jones who stuffed Tony into the water tank. Now, it's Jones guarding Tony again. It seems that it's quite hateful. Jones estimates that besides warlords, Tony hates himself the most among these people, right? Should we tell the warlord about Tony making armor? Muttered to himself, and Jones quickly shook his head. Jones was certain that if he had revealed Tony's story, he would definitely not have survived. And if Tony can't survive, he'll just be the honest subordinate of that small warlord, and he won't even want to run away. And under this warlord, I am still the one with the lowest status, and I'm sure I will die in some battle. Damn it. The thoughts in his mind raced around, and Jones couldn't help but let out a long sigh. He really didn't know what to do now. Where's the golden finger? Where's the system? Where's the superpower? Oh my God, you damn thing. When did I ever say I wanted to come to this damn world? With a fierce roar in my heart, Jones' eyes heated up and he almost burst into tears. He couldn't see any hope. It was like this in his past life, and it's even more so now. In my past life, without a diploma, talent, or background, I was destined to be just a laborer. This life is even more miserable. I offended Iron Man Tony Stark without knowing anything, and stayed in such a damn place, becoming terrorists. Thinking about it, Jones's nose soured and he even shed tears. Feeling the warm liquid on his face, Jones couldn't help but be taken aback. Damn it, how could he cry? Subconsciously, Jones glanced around a few times before lifting his arm and wiping it against his eyes anyway. It's good if no one sees it. However, as soon as Jones's hand touched his eyes, he suddenly felt a severe pain in his eyes. Humph! Jones let out a painful groan and rubbed his eyes before lying on the ground. Chapter 2. Superman's Eyes. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Damn it, what kind of ghost is this? Jones now really wants to scream out in pain, at least to vent his emotions, but the pain in his eyes makes him unable to even make a sound, and even a single move is a luxury. However, Jones didn't have any complaints in his heart, instead he was full of surprises. Having read so many novels in his past life, Jones couldn't believe that just touching his eyes with his hand would cause such pain. At this moment, the pain in his eyes, without any doubt, was definitely his own golden finger. Is it the ability of the eyes? The Reincarnation Eye? The Reincarnation Eye? Or the Eternal Kaleidoscope? It's really not good, even the white eye is fine. Although it doesn't feel very strong. It has to be said that Jones's nerves are also extremely thick. Even if it hurts so much that he can't speak, Jones can still think wildly in his mind, and he is almost starting to yearn for a better life in the future. At that moment, Jones suddenly heard a series of chaotic footsteps reaching his ears, and the next moment, the voices of the terrorists also reached Jones' ears. Jones! Damn it, what's wrong with you? Ems, go take a look at that guy inside. As the words fell, Jones could hear them clearly. A few people ran straight past him. In the next moment, the door of the room where Tony was being held was opened, and then Tony and Ethan's screams also came into Jones' ears from inside. And then it's just the pain between the two of them. Shabbies. Upon hearing Tony's painful moan, Jones couldn't help but curse out loud in his heart. This situation, without even thinking about it, was definitely the group of idiots who saw themselves falling in the surveillance footage and thought Tony had done something. Now they are inside to clean up Tony. Moreover, Jones is very certain that Tony must be quite miserable at this time, and at the same time, Tony will definitely count this on himself. Damn it, Tony is definitely not going to die anymore. With a helpless cry, Jones began to silently pray in his heart. As for the content of the prayer, of course, I hope Goldfinger can be stronger, not to mention anything else, just stronger than Tony's steel armor. As time passed, Jones felt Tony's screams in his ears become much quieter, and he didn't know if it was about to end or if the torment of the terrorists was coming to an end. At this moment, Jones also felt that the pain in his eyes had eased a lot, at least not to the point where you can't even make a sound. Of course, even if he could already make a sound now, Jones did not speak out in sorrow. He had already carried the pain just now, so what is this now? Compared to this pain, Jones is more looking forward to his golden finger. Quickly, the pain in Jones's eyeballs dissipated and was replaced by a warm sensation. It's like soaking in warm water, very comfortable. At the same time, a wave of information flooded into Jones's mind, making him instantly understand what kind of change had happened to his eyes. After receiving this message from an unknown source, Jones couldn't help but be replaced by a powerful joy in his heart. Surprisingly. Superman's eyes. How abnormal are Superman's eyes? More than 90% of Earthlings probably know that night vision, farsightedness, perspective, and microscopy are just basic abilities of Superman's eyes. For Jones today, the most useful ability of Superman's eyes is undoubtedly the thermal beam. Although having a thermal beam doesn't mean Jones is invincible, at least for Jones, being able to escape from the current deadlock is undoubtedly the best thing for him. However, the joy in Superman's eyes did not last long, and the following information directly poured cold water on Jones. Jones's current eyes are not so much superhuman eyes as those of a newborn Kryptonian. Jones's eyes now, apart from being slightly stronger than before, have no special features, no perspective, no night vision, no microscopy, nor the most surprising thermal beam that surprises him. And if Jones wants to have all the things mentioned above, it's easy, just wash your hands with the light and radiation of the yellow star. Simply put, Jones's eyes now need to grow on their own. After understanding all of this, Jones couldn't help but sigh helplessly in his heart. He thought he had flown into the sky, but to his surprise, he was still a loser. However, Jones now has the capital to make a comeback. So, let's start by being a terrorist honestly. With a murmur in his heart, Jones opened his eyes and quickly got up from the ground. Speaking of which, those terrorists are really ruthless. After confirming that they were not dead, they didn't even move and just threw them here without care. Hey! Jones, you guy, how could you wake up so quickly? As soon as Jones got up from the ground, he heard a slightly mocking voice. Angered in his heart, Jones's face remained unchanged. With a head spin, Jones looked directly at the sound and said, "Ale. Did the boss let you guard that guy when I was unconscious?" "That's right." Upon hearing Jones' words, the yellow man named Yale nodded lightly with an undisguised smile in his eyes. "Boss said. You've caused so much trouble for us. When you wake up, you'll just go clean up all the ammunition outside." "Really?" Jones was taken aback when he heard Yale's words, and a hint of joy appeared on his face. "Since that's the case, then I'll go over." After speaking, Jones didn't wait for Yale to speak before turning around and walking towards the outside. Later on, he even trotted straight up, looking quite eager. Chapter 3, Gradually Become Stronger. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This guy. After waking up, is his brain also stupid? As he watched Jones run out with enthusiasm, a hint of doubt appeared on Yale's face. If guarding Tony Stark is not a very good job, then some jobs are even worse than guarding Tony. For example, cleaning the cave, cleaning up ammunition stored outdoors. Wait. Of course, such jobs are not common, that's why Jones went to guard Tony Stark. However, even though it was guarding Tony's job, Jones still managed to come up with such a trick. The warlord who had made a trip for nothing confirmed that Jones was just unconscious and had nothing to do with Tony. In anger, he punished Jones directly to clear the ammunition. In fact, the ammunition outside should be cleaned once a week. The last time it was cleaned was 4 days ago before Jones crossed over. Of course, the person in charge of cleaning last time was also Jones. Quickly walking out of the cave, when the scorching light shone down on Jones's entire body, he only felt a warm sensation coming from his eyes, which was very comfortable. Subconsciously looking up at the sun in the sky, Jones only felt his eyes instantly become more comfortable. The light and radiation around his eyes seemed to be directly absorbed, making Jones clearly feel the changes in his eyes. It was constantly getting stronger. Superman took nearly 30 years to grow up, but if you just want to have combat power, it shouldn't take that long. I hope you can have the strength to fight Tony when he creates steel armor, right? A thought flashed through his mind, and Jones was suddenly taken aback. He said, "Why let Tony grow? If I had spoken about Tony's manufacturing of steel armor now, I would have had a longer time to grow. Isn't that better?" "Jones, what are you fooling around with? Go clean up the ammunition. Just as Jones was lost in thought, a roar suddenly entered his ear. Ah! For a moment, Jones turned his gaze directly to where the sound was coming from. Then, Jones' mood instantly lowered and he said loudly, "Okay boss, I know. I'll go right away." Quickly walking towards the ammunition storage area, Jones suppressed his anger. No way. Tony cannot be reported. Even if he grows up, he is just a person with strong eyes and no protective equipment or other special abilities. With just one bullet, he can kill himself. Compared to terrorists, Tony poses a much smaller threat to himself. At least Tony wearing simple steel armor looks like this. Holding a huge cloth in his hand, Jones quickly wiped the dust off the ammunition. Of course, unless necessary, Jones's head was always looking towards the sky, and most of the time his eyes were fixed on the huge fireball. Although Jones's eyes can absorb the light and radiation of yellow stars as long as they are on Earth, there is a huge difference in eye growth between day and night when looking directly at the sun and not looking at the sun. Jones doesn't have that much time to waste, and for him now, any growth is extremely important. If it weren't for the damn job of clearing ammunition to restrain himself, Jones would have spent all his time staring at that fireball. Jones had said before that if all the ammunition in this stronghold were used up, it would be almost enough to blow up a district of New York. Although there are some exaggerated elements, there is still a lot of ammunition here, and cleaning them up is also a considerable task. Quickly, a day passed, and as the sun slowly set, Jones often took a deep breath. His eyes kept growing, but his body was still an ordinary person's at most, it's just a bit stronger. A day of hard work has already made Jones pant heavily. But even so, it cannot conceal Jones' inner joy. Although the sun has already set and the sky has completely darkened, the surrounding scenery in Jones's eyes is still as clear as daylight, and everything is clearly visible. Just absorbing a day's worth of light radiation, do you already have the ability to see at night? Jones muttered in his heart, and at the same time, he looked towards the distance. The line of sight is also much broader, and even small stones from 300 to 400 meters away can be clearly seen. Kryptonians. They are truly a unique nation. However, the most important thing is the ability of thermal radiation. Jones withdrew his gaze from the distance and lowered his head to look at a stone beneath his feet. Come on, let me see how strong I am now. Jones muttered unconsciously as he slowly exhaled. In the next moment, Jones's eyes instantly turned red, and then two orange-red lights shot out of Jones's eyes. The two orange-red lights intertwined in mid-air and hit the stone of Jones's target in the blink of an eye, making a muffled sound. Chapter 4 can go out. You are listening at novelfull.audio. And then there won't be any further staring straight at the stone that had just been targeted. Jones had a particularly strange expression on his face. After a while, Jones turned around and walked towards the cave without hesitation. Although Jones holds the lowest position in this terror prevention, he will not be bullied casually. After a busy day, Jones can go straight to rest without attending the night's vigil. As Jones slowly walked away, the stone that had just been targeted was exposed to the moonlight. Accompanied by the hazy moonlight, it can be clearly seen that the small stone is no longer in its previous position, clearly driven away by the impact force of Jones's thermal fiber. However, if you turn your gaze and look at it from another angle, you can clearly see the burnt black mark on the stone. It's just Jones' masterpiece, and it's also the reason why Jones turned around and left. Beat a stone that is not larger than a brick and fly it several tens of centimeters, leaving a black mark on such a stone. Such an attack, even if it hits a person without any obstacles, well, I estimate we can burn him a cigarette scar. Although he was somewhat disappointed with the power of the thermal energy beam, when the teacher spoke, Jones was still full of expectations. After all, this was only the first day. Although the temperature just now was not high, it should have been several hundred degrees. The light radiation absorbed during the day can make him emit several hundred degrees of thermal energy rays. So what about 2 days? How about 3 days? How about a week? How about a month? You should know that according to the plot in the original work, Tony was imprisoned for a full 3 months before successfully escaping his ascension. It's only been a few days now, and Jones still has time to grow. On the second and third days, Jones was still able to stay in the sunshine, and the cleaning of those ammunition was not yet completed. But from the fourth day, Jones had no choice but to return to the cave and continue to be Tony's jailer. As he walked towards Tony's small prison, Jones began to think quickly in his mind. If he had been keeping Tony under custody, he would not have had the opportunity to absorb light radiation as he had in the past 3 days. If it is normal, if it cannot be absorbed, then it cannot be absorbed. However, at this critical moment of life and death, if Jones is slightly weaker, there may be an additional risk of death. So, Jones must go under the sunshine, The thoughts quickly circulated in his mind, and Jones couldn't help but roar. He couldn't figure out how to get to the sunshine. What's a ghost called? Jones' voice fell and he let out a loud shout directly from the cave. Is there someone inside? Upon hearing this voice, Jones couldn't help but be taken aback. Then he quickly reflected and went to clear the ammunition himself. Naturally, Tony's side would need to be guarded by someone else. The person who just spoke should be the one looking at Tony. Without saying anything more, Jones took a step forward and soon the cave where Tony was being held had entered Jones's sight. Yale. Jones was taken aback when he saw the person guarding Tony, and then quickly realized that this guy should have replaced him. Upon hearing Jones' words, Ale responded, but suddenly an angry expression appeared on his face. I say, you're such a annoying guy. Jones couldn't help but be taken aback when he heard Yale's words and said helplessly, what's wrong? Do you know that because of this, the boss has decided to have someone to guard Tony Stark at night? Upon hearing Jones' question, Arl's anger grew even stronger. Obviously, he was the other person besides Jones who was going to guard Tony. Really? Ale was angry, but Jones' eyes suddenly lit up with a hint of surprise on his face. What is another village with hidden willows and bright flowers? Now this is it. Jones really wants to hold on to that boss's head and give him a hard kiss now. Although Jones will definitely regret it after kissing him. Jones. What do you mean? Seeing Jones' expression about to burst into laughter, Yale jumped up and walked quickly to Jones. Yale's mouth grinned and his expression turned into a fierce expression. Kid, do you want to be beaten? Let's talk about it when you can do it, right? Jones looked disdainfully at Aller, with a mocking expression on his face. Do you dare to take action here? This place is full of surveillance cameras, and you're watching Tony Stark now. You really don't dare to kill you as the boss. Do you think we need you here? You. Upon hearing Jones' words, Ale let out a loud shout, his eyes almost popping out. However, after struggling for a while, no action was taken. Hee. With a sneer, Jones turned around and walked towards the outside of the cave. Don't say I'm cheating you, I'll just come and watch him tonight. As the words fell, Jones's pace quickened a bit and he could go out now. It can be under the sun now. The problem that has been bothering me for so long has been solved like this. Chapter 5. Time, it's almost here. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Jones was happy, but Ale behind him was not as happy as Jones. He stared fiercely at the back of Jones as he left, and Ale's face was filled with a gloomy expression. He had no reason not to hold a grudge against Jones, and Arl's position among these terrorists was not very high, but he didn't have to do the thankless job of guarding Tony at first. But when Jones had an accident before, although the boss was certain that Tony was not the one causing the trouble, he became a bit angry and wary, so he prepared to keep an eye on Tony day and night. Watching day and night, it's impossible to just have Jones alone. At this point, we need to find a unlucky guy to take turns watching over Jones. And Yale is just the unlucky guy who was found out. Jones naturally understood this truth, but now she doesn't mind at all. It's just offending Yale, a terrorist with little power. As long as he can stay in the sunshine every day, even if he offends 4 or 5 terrorists, Jones doesn't care. What are you afraid of? Anyway, they couldn't have killed themselves on the spot either. Being bathed in the warm sunshine again, Jones's mood can be said to be very happy. As a terrorist and a member of parliament who had already kidnapped Tony Stark, Jones and his team have no other plans at the moment. There are no people assigned to work, and as long as they do not leave the base, they can move freely. Because he has to watch his shift at night, Jones now belongs to the category of unemployed people. As soon as Jones walked out of the cave, he flipped over and climbed onto a box of ammunition, lying on top of it, and then I just widened my eyes and stared at the sun in the sky. The height of the ammunition box is high enough that no one below can see Jones with his eyes open, so Jones doesn't have to worry about his behavior causing suspicion. What if I don't have the energy to watch the class at night? Mind him. Compared to my own little life, those are nothing more. In this way, Jones lived a life of absorbing light radiation during the day and staring at Benny at night, and his eye abilities were also increasing day by day. The supervision of Superman's eyes had been fully activated, but in terms of farsightedness, Jones now can even see flies 2 or 3 kilometers away clearly. And the ability of thermal light that concerns Jones the most is much stronger than when Jones first experimented. Although limited by conditions, Jones estimated that the temperature of his thermal light had reached a point where it could melt steel. Without calculating temperature, in terms of impact force, thermal light could also directly break a small rock. Although this strength is far inferior to the laser eye Scott, it is enough for Jones to protect himself now. Moreover, Scott's laser eyes are mainly driven by the power of shock waves. Although they may appear the same, they have completely different development directions. Thinking of the laser eye Scott, Jones couldn't help but feel a sour feeling in his heart. Scott's laser eye came from a mutant power, and it was a relatively special type. When he first woke up, Scott's strength was extremely strong, and then it became stronger and stronger with the passage of time. And when I first woke up, my eyes were basically no different from ordinary people, while Jones worked tirelessly every day to absorb light radiation, and it took almost 3 months to grow to the current level. It was really a huge difference. That's right. It has been almost 3 months since Jones first awakened Superman's eyes. Although he didn't have much knowledge in physics and energy, through his observation of perspective, Jones was almost certain that Tony's steel armor was about to be manufactured. On the other hand, the boss's patience is almost reaching its limit. On that day, just as he had replaced Ale, Jones saw the boss quickly leading a group of people to the room where Tony was being held. Looking at the tightly closed iron door in front of him, the boss took a deep breath and then turned his gaze to Jones. Open. Yes. Upon hearing the boss's words, Jones nodded lightly and took out the key from his pocket, unlocking the large lock on the iron door behind him. Of course, the door that holds Tony Stark cannot be guarded by only one lock. Simply put, after opening a few more mechanisms, Jaffa pushed hard and finally opened the door in front of him. Subsequently, the boss directly led a group of fierce terrorists to infiltrate. Jones is naturally also among them. As soon as he entered the door, Jones's gaze instinctively turned to Tony and Ethan. Faced with the sudden intrusion of terrorists, the two of them instinctively exchanged a glance, with a hint of doubt in their eyes and anxiety. However, this guy is much more energetic than 3 months ago. Jones looked at Tony Stark quietly, and a conclusion came to his mind. It's not just about his appearance. Tony seems to be a different person. Sure enough, this experience of being kidnapped has directly changed Tony's previous thinking. Although steel armor has not been fully developed yet, it's already Iron Man's thinking. After all, this world is not just about oneself growing. Chapter 6. Bring more hate. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Of course, no matter how much Tony grows in the future, when facing the sudden intrusion of terrorists, he still holds his head in both hands and his eyes are full of panic. Seeing Tony's appearance, the boss couldn't help but show a hint of pride on his face. With a smile on his lips, the boss spoke directly, "Relax, Tony." Upon hearing the boss's words, Tony was taken aback and slowly lowered his hands holding his head. Seeing Tony's performance, the boss's proud expression became even stronger. This is Tony Stark, a high-ranking figure in the entire United States who has his place, but now, such a person must obey him, not even life or death in his own hands. How can this not make the boss proud? Stepping up to Tony, the boss reached out and touched the arc reactor on his chest, but whispered, "Bows and arrows were once the pinnacle of weapon technology. Genghis Khan used bows and arrows to conquer the Pacific to Ukraine, with territory twice as large as the Alexander Empire and 4 times that of the Roman Empire. In today's world, as long as you have Stark's latest weapon, you can dominate." As he spoke, the boss walked directly to Tony's workbench and picked up a stack of blueprints on it. Seeing the boss's movements, Tony's forehead almost instantly caught a glimpse of Han. There were many drawings in that stack, and looking at one alone was not a big deal. However, if all the drawings were overlapped, one could see the design of the steel armor. If this matter is discovered by the boss, he and Ethan will probably die directly here. However, Tony's luck was obviously good. Although he picked up this stack of design drawings, the boss's mind was not focused on it. He just glanced at it and directly put down the design drawings. Not long after, "It's my turn to rule." At this point, the boss changed his tone and looked directly at Tony with sharp eyes, whispering, "But why don't you work hard?" "We're working hard." Upon hearing the boss's words, Tony didn't say anything before Ethan couldn't help but speak. Upon hearing Ethan's words, the boss slowly turned his head to look at him and said, "I let you survive, and you're just repaying me like this. The weapons are very complex." "He's already working hard." Ethan looked straight into the boss's eyes, his heart couldn't help but tremble, and even his breath weakened a lot. He is just a scientist, neither a top giant like Tony nor a powerful individual. Faced with a brutal terrorist who could take his life at any time, Ethan's ability to do so is already great. However, perhaps Ethan's strange feeling caused the boss's suspicion. His gaze shifted from Ethan's face and the boss said coldly, "Kneel down." Upon hearing the boss's words, Ethan was taken aback but did not make any movements. At this moment, Jones, who had been standing in the back all along, couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Such scenes had happened many times before, and usually it was time for him to appear. "We're going to pull another wave of hatred." With a curl of his mouth, Jones walked 3 or 2 steps behind Ethan, pressed Ethan's shoulder, and then knelt down directly. The boss over there walked directly to Tony's steelmaking furnace and used a clip to extract a piece of fiery red carbon, saying, "Do you really think I'm a fool? Are you telling the truth? We both are working hard." Ethan seemed to think of what the boss was going to do when he saw his movements. He instinctively swallowed a mouthful of saliva and whispered, "We both are working hard." However, the boss obviously didn't believe Ethan's words. He walked up to Ethan with a charcoal block between his legs and turned his gaze directly to Jones. He whispered, "Let him open his mouth. Your sister." Although Jones knew that such a thing would happen, he still wanted to slap the boss in the face. If he wanted to hate him, he would hate him. "Is it necessary to trap me too?" In his mind, he cursed the boss 11,000 times, but Jones still reached out and pressed Ethan's head onto the front desk, while violently breaking Ethan's mouth open. "Forget it. Anyway, I've already offended him hard. If I can't ease my hatred towards Tony in the future, I'll find a chance to be him." Thoughts flashed through his mind, and with a desperate attitude, Jones's movements became much more agile for a moment. Nodding in satisfaction, the boss held up a charcoal block and approached Ethan, saying, "What the hell are you doing? Tell me. What does he want?" Although he didn't touch Ethan with a charcoal block, the red charcoal block still filled Ethan's heart with anxiety. Taking a deep breath of air, Ethan kept shouting, "He's building the Jericho missile. He's building the Jericho missile. Hee, what do you want? Do you want me to give you a delivery date?" Tony couldn't help but see the boss's action. During this time, he had already established a good relationship with Ethan. If he had to just watch Ethan suffer like this, he wouldn't be able to do it. Chapter 7. Finally, this day has arrived. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Upon hearing Tony's words, the boss looked at him indifferently, but didn't say anything. The charcoal blocks on the shelf were getting closer and closer to Ethan's mouth. "I need him." Tony couldn't help but shout loudly upon seeing this scene. "You can't kill him. He is a good assistant." Glancing at Tony, the boss lowered his head and looked at Ethan on the desk. After a moment of silence, the boss didn't say anything, but his hand loosened and he threw the charcoal block held in the clip to the side. "My missile must be assembled tomorrow," he spoke softly, and the boss's gaze at Tony was particularly gloomy. Although he didn't say what would happen if it wasn't assembled, the meaning behind it was self-evident. As the words fell, the boss threw the clip in his hand and walked out of the room without looking back. After all the terrorists had walked out, Jones finally released Ethan. Turning his head to the silent Tony, Jones suddenly grinned with an inexplicable smile on his face. "Tony Stark. It seems like you're going to do your best." Upon hearing Jones's words, Tony's gaze swept directly towards him, but at that moment Jones had already taken a step towards the outside. After a moment of silence, Tony finally didn't say anything. For Tony, these 3 months were something he had never imagined before. Boss, Jones, Yale, such a small person, he wouldn't even look at them directly before. But now, each of them can freely mock him, and the boss is constantly threatening his life. At first, Tony would still say a few words if someone mocked him, but now he no longer has that thought in mind. Tomorrow. Tony looked straight at Jones, who was closing the iron gate, but a hint of gloom appeared in his eyes. "Tomorrow, I'll make sure you all come back." Jones doesn't know what Tony is thinking, but he can roughly guess a part. Since the boss has already set a date for Tony, it means that Tony's steel armor is about to be completed. Whether it's right or wrong, the fate of Jones in the future depends entirely on tomorrow. That night, Tony didn't rest at all, and he couldn't rest either. Throughout the night, Tony kept tapping and striking the parts of his steel armor. Jones didn't rest either. Although he really wanted to take a good rest to deal with Tony's escape tomorrow, he didn't listen to Tony's work inside. The huge noise made Jones, who was guarding Tony, unable to do anything even if he wanted to be lazy. Although Jones felt that time passed a bit slowly tonight, it still passed in a blink of an eye. As the sound of Tony tapping inside came to an end, Jones's face also became serious. If I remember correctly, Tony should have completed the production of steel armor by now and is now ready to wear that bulky iron sheet. I don't know when those idiots will discover Tony's abnormality. Do you want to have a better physique for them? The thought flashed through his mind, and the next moment Jones shook his head directly. It's better to say goodbye. For me, Tony's deterrent power is much smaller than a group of terrorists. At least for now. At the thought of this, Jones couldn't help but furrow his brow. His ability is very strong, but his physical fitness does not improve with the strength of his eyes. No matter how much damage his thermal energy and light will cause in the future, he can still solve himself with just one bullet. And if you want to solve this certainty, Tony's steel armor is undoubtedly a very good choice. With this in mind, Jones couldn't help but look into Tony's room and say, "Tony Stark, it seems like we're really going to become enemies. At least. You wouldn't kindly give me a suit of steel armor, would you?" Just as Jones was thinking about how to get a suit of steel armor, Arler's voice suddenly rang out from behind. "Jones. It's a shift change." I got it. Jones slowly withdrew his gaze and calmly responded, then walked straight out of the cave. When Jones walked up to Yale, his footsteps stopped and he looked straight into Yale's eyes, whispering, "Good luck to you." After speaking, Jones walked out of the cave without looking back. This guy. What's going on? Seeing Jones' performance, Yale couldn't help but furrow his brow and a hint of doubt appeared on his face. However, in the end, Al shook his head and walked to the door. He still has to watch here for a whole day. How can he have so much energy to daydream? Having sentenced Ale to death in his heart, Jones went straight ahead and lay on the ammunition box at the edge of the stronghold, then began to close his eyes and rest assured. Chapter 8 is starting. You are listening at novelfull.audio. During these 3 months, apart from guarding Tony every day and absorbing light radiation, most of Jones' energy was spent recalling the previous plot. Although some details may have been blurred in Jones' memory, most of the plot was deeply imprinted in his mind. Firstly, after Tony comes out, he will directly activate the arson mode and destroy all the ammunition in this stronghold. Jones had never seen the terrifying power of these explosive explosions, but he could be certain that if he dared to stay in the center of the explosion without knowing it, he would probably have nothing left. No, perhaps, I can still leave a pair of eyes. So Jones must leave this stronghold before Tony comes out. Leave far away. Thinking of this, Jones seemed to casually turn over, but his gaze scanned the outside of the stronghold. Terrorist strongholds, even if they are terrorists, are not easy to leave. In order to prevent the existence of spies, no one can leave the stronghold unless there is an order from the boss, and several gunmen are lurking in the surrounding high ground. As long as someone dares to leave without permission, a large number of bullets will greet them. 3 on the left, at 50, 100, and 150 meters respectively, and 4 on the right, at 20, 70, 100 and 180 meters respectively. There are 2 with snipers, 5 with rifles. It's a bit difficult, murmured softly, and Jones began to quickly ponder in his mind. When Tony broke out of the cave, it took him some time, and the half-dead Ethan also delayed Tony for a while. The boss's howitzer also delayed Tony for a while, and then Tony would come out and set fire. No way. I can't wait for Tony to come out before leaving. Leaving aside the possibility of escaping the explosion in such a short period of time, just the things I did to Tony before, he could never let me go so easily. Although Tony doesn't have any bullets on his steel armor now, just 2 huge flamethrowers is a big trouble. Annoying. Jones took a long, prominent breath and flipped over irritably, aiming his gaze at the sun in the sky. Why didn't you give me a superhuman body? It's just eyes. If I had a superhuman system, such a strong sun would at least give me the ability to defend against bullets, right? A thought flashed through his mind, and Jones suddenly flipped over and sat up. I got it. With a flash of inspiration, Jones jumped out of the ammunition box in 3 or 2 steps and ran towards the cave. Then, he walked straight towards a group of terrorists gathered not far from the cave entrance. Hey! Jones! You kid, don't you really enjoy sunbathing? Why did you run into the cave today? A terrorist next to Jones chuckled and asked as he saw Jones' movements. Stop making a fuss. Upon hearing this person's words, a hint of helplessness appeared on Jones' face. I like to bask in the sun, but I don't like heatstroke. Sleeping outside on such a hot day will kill you, okay? Ha ha ha. That's because you're too weak. Upon hearing Jones' words, the terrorists chuckled and mercilessly mocked, we've been staring outside every day, why haven't we seen them suffer from heatstroke? What we are talking about is naturally the few scouts that Jones observed just now. Since they are scouts, it is impossible for them to work day and night. They will also change shifts, and the person in front of us is one of those people. Jones changed shifts and rested, so he naturally changed shifts. And this guy is one of the more lively ones in that group. Every time he changes shifts, he doesn't just go to rest, but instead talks and talks with a group of terrorists here. And this person is also an important part of Jones' plan. Alright, don't laugh at me, of course I can't compare to you. Upon hearing his words, Jones shook his head helplessly, and a timely expression of disappointment appeared on his face. That's right, you have some self-awareness. After dealing with the terrorist absent-mindedly, Jones couldn't help but feel a hint of anxiety in his heart. Tony, this guy should have started for some time now, right? Why hasn't the boss noticed his abnormality yet? What a waste. Without mercy, the boss was arranged in his heart, but Jones's gaze occasionally turned towards a room inside the cave. That is the monitoring room of this stronghold, which is an important location of the stronghold. The boss is currently carrying it inside. Do whatever you want. Shortly after Jones's thoughts arose, the two of them suddenly rushed out of the surveillance room. Then they ran straight towards Tony. We're starting. Seeing their movements, Jones's eyes lit up and a sense of joy couldn't help but surge in his heart. However, Jones's face was calm and he couldn't even tell what he was thinking. Chapter 9. Get in. You are listening at novelfull.audio. These guys are always flustered and unstable. Jones didn't say anything, but the terrorist next to him spoke up. Looking straight at the two people running towards Tony, their faces were full of mockery. Haha. Upon hearing this person's words, Jones chuckled and spoke directly, haven't mature and steady people all gone to do jobs like yours? Of course, the rest are all unstable guys. Jones, you kid, I love to hear that, haha. Upon hearing Jones' words, the terrorist's face instantly filled with a smile. With a big wave of his hand, the terrorist patted Jones on the shoulder a few times and loudly said, they all say you're weak, but I'll keep an eye on you. Work hard, from now on, I'll cover you up. Really? Thank you, big brother. Upon hearing this man's words, Jones was taken aback, his face instantly filled with a look of surprise. However, what was hidden in Jones' eyes was full of disdain. Are you joking? Are you still covering me? If you can survive for an hour and say this to me again, I might believe it. With a perfunctory remark about the terrorist who was already dead in his heart, Jones activated his perspective and looked directly into Tony's room. Of course, it has been proven that Jones's abilities have not yet reached a strong level. Even with his full use of perspective, he can only see through a rock layer of 1 or 2 meters, and cannot even see Tony's scene. However, Jones doesn't mind at all about it. If he can't see it, he can't see it. Anyway, he has a clear understanding of the future development. The rest is just to follow your own plan. And time should be up. Jones looked quietly in the direction of Tony's side, his eyes flickering, and he muttered to himself. As Jones's thoughts fell, a violent explosion came directly from the depths of the cave, and a huge sound spread along the cave, shaking several people on Jones's side a bit confused. What situation? In just an instant, the terrorist who claimed to be covering Jones jumped up from the ground, his eyes still full of confusion. At the same time, gunshots echoed directly from inside. All of this, except for fools, is known. Tony's side has an accident. And the next moment, the boss who quickly rushed out of the monitoring room also confirmed this fact. As soon as he rushed out of the monitoring room, the boss directly ordered Jones and his group to attack inside. But he himself walked at the back, picked up the howitzer and followed the pace of the people in front. Jones had no resistance to the boss's command, and with a squint of his eyes, he quickly ran towards the depths of the cave. However, Jones is not foolish enough to run to the front, and of course, he did not fall behind in the team. And just as Jones arrived at a turning point, the few people running at the front came back from there at a faster speed. Later, Ethan, with his eyes on him and a gun in hand, rushed over from behind. However, what greeted Ethan were a dozen loaded machine guns. Looking at Ethan's stunned gaze, Jones almost burst into laughter. Of course, he knew Ethan was trying to delay Tony's time. The original work also knew Ethan would do this, but when Jones saw this scene with his own eyes, he couldn't help but laugh, and even forgot the serious atmosphere here. Of course, Jones thinks Ethan is funny, but the boss and his team don't think so anymore. Pushing away the crowd, the boss walked straight from the back to the front, staring straight at Ethan, his eyes swollen with coldness and saying, "Ethan. Great, you did a great job." Upon hearing the boss's words, Ethan couldn't help but be taken aback. However, before he could recover, the gun in the boss's hand rang. A shot hit Ethan's abdomen, and the boss turned his head and shouted loudly, "Get in here, kill Tony Stark." Yes. Upon hearing the leader's words, a group of terrorists responded loudly and quickly ran towards the inside, while Ethan followed them directly. And the boss's decision made Jones look at him somewhat differently. Although his idea of using Stark's industrial weapons to dominate the world was somewhat childish, he was able to give orders decisively at this time, not being bound by his own goals, and could be considered a bit bold. Of course, no matter how he decides, he will inevitably die today. Quickly walking past the boss, Jones and his group soon arrived outside the house where Tony was being held. As soon as they arrived here, the first thing everyone saw was 3 corpses on the ground. These were the bodies of Ale, who was guarding Tony, and the 2 people who were ordered by the boss to come and see the situation. Just as a group of people were standing still, a person suddenly looked at Jones and said, "Jones. You go ahead and take a look." Chapter 10. Tony escaped. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Upon hearing this person's words, Jones narrowed his eyes and turned his gaze directly to him. Each of them doesn't know what exactly happened inside, but they don't have to think about it. The first one to enter is definitely not a good thing. Gently shaking his head, Jones spoke directly, "Why let me go? Tony Stark is just a powerless scientist. Are you afraid?" Upon hearing Jones's words, the terrorist's face immediately froze, but as a terrorist, he was also full of terrorist characteristics. He gave Jones a fierce glare, and the terrorist shouted loudly, "You mind me, I'm not afraid. Now, hurry inside." As he spoke, the terrorist pointed his gun at Jones and shouted loudly, "Go. This bastard." Seeing the actions of the terrorists, Jones couldn't help but curse inwardly. Now Tony is not familiar with steel armor, and he hates himself very much. If he goes in first, Tony will definitely give himself a punch with all his might. Although the current steel armor's power assist system may not be particularly strong, relying on an ordinary person's body, getting hit is definitely not fatal or harmful. Overall, Jones is definitely not the first to enter. Thinking of this, Jones couldn't help but show a hint of ferocity in his eyes. Looking straight at the terrorist with a threatening expression on his face, Jones fired one end of his rifle directly at the ground in front of his feet. A series of gunshots shook all the terrorists except Jones on the spot, staring blankly at him. Everyone's faces were filled with a look of shock, and they couldn't accept it. Jones, who had always been at the lowest position, how could he do such a thing? They were surprised, but Jones didn't accompany them in a daze. With a flash of his figure, Jones rushed straight behind the terrorist who had just threatened him and aimed his gun at his back. "You! Go in, hurry up." The form suddenly changed. Originally, the terrorists wanted to threaten Jones to be the first to go in and explore, but in just an instant, their identities immediately changed. Jones. Seeing Jones' actions, the group of terrorists were all stunned. They couldn't think of how Jones, who had always been at the lowest position, could have done such a thing. "Stop talking nonsense. Hurry inside." Jones threatened the terrorist, but he opened his perspective and looked into Tony's room. According to the plot, Tony will definitely not waste time inside. As long as his steel armor is worn, he will rush out of it without hesitation. And that was the most important time in the Jones plan. Jones pointed his gun at the terrorists, who showed no intention of compromise. After spending so much time together, he could say he knew Jones very well, or it could be Jones from before. Although Jones's current behavior surprised him a bit, he was still very certain that Jones would never dare to shoot himself. So, the terrorists not only didn't have the intention to explore, but even started threatening Jones directly. Faced with the threat from this guy, Jones's face was actually calm, and he had no intention of paying attention to him now. Coming out. Suddenly, Jones let out a loud shout without warning. Upon hearing Jones's words, the group of terrorists couldn't help but be taken aback. They instinctively looked at Jones, but were surprised to find that he turned around and ran towards the other side of the cave. What's the situation? Subconsciously, the faces of the terrorists couldn't help but show a puzzled expression. The next moment, waves of silent footsteps directly told them the answer. The terrorist at the forefront turned his head to look in the direction of the footsteps, but only saw a bright blue light. Then, he felt a huge force coming from his chest, and he flew back towards the rear, smashing 2 terrorists in the air. Damn it, what is this? This situation naturally caught the attention of other terrorists, who no longer had the intention of meddling in Jones's affairs. The terrorists' bullets poured directly at Tony, who had already worn steel armor. Although Tony's armor was not made of particularly good materials, it was also forged by Tony himself. A mere bullet attack naturally cannot cause any damage to it. If it's just that Tony's armor hasn't been damaged, the bouncing bullets may have even knocked down 2 or 3 terrorists. Seeing this scene, Tony couldn't help but smile under his mask, and then became serious again. Taking a step forward, Tony directly punched the terrorist in front of him. The strong pressure on the equipment, combined with the path Ethan pointed out to Tony before rushing out, made Tony walk towards the cave without any pause. And those terrorists who tried to stop Tony were all knocked down by Tony's punch, without any exceptions.